So, when a company puts out a big, bold climate goal, how can you or I know if it's for real? Today, we're diving into this massive issue of sustainability washing in Asia. We're going to figure out who's actually responsible for making sure these green promises are legit, and maybe more importantly, how they're being held accountable. Here's the game plan. First, we'll nail down exactly what this problem of sustainability washing is. Then, we'll look at who's on the hook for it in the boardroom, explore the legal tools being used to ensure accountability, and finally, check out the roadmap for building a stronger, more transparent system for everyone. All right, let's kick things off with the problem itself, the thing that's really starting to eat away at trust in the market. Companies making these huge sustainability claims that just don't line up with what they're actually doing. Now, you've probably heard of greenwashing, right? Well, the OECD is broadening that term to sustainability washing. And that's because this isn't just about environmental promises anymore. It covers the whole shebang: environmental, social, and governance issues, ESG. And this is a really critical distinction to make. Disinformation means you're intentionally trying to deceive people. That can lead to some seriously heavy legal consequences. Misinformation, on the other hand, is more about being careless, failing to do your homework. The key difference here, and it's a big one, is intent. And you have to understand, this isn't just a PR problem. As these sustainability risks become absolutely central to a company's bottom line, the accuracy of their claims has a direct, real-world impact on investor decisions and, honestly, on the confidence we have in the entire market. So, this leads us to the big question. Who is ultimately responsible for making sure these claims are actually true? Well, the buck stops right in the boardroom. You see, at the very heart of corporate law, directors have these two fundamental jobs. The duty of care basically means they have to do their homework and be diligent. And the duty of loyalty means they have to act in the company's best interest, period. And more, that definition includes properly overseeing sustainability risks. Now, how a board actually behaves depends a lot on the legal framework they're operating in. For example, in places like China and India, they follow what's called a pluralist model. This means directors are legally required to balance the interests of employees and the community right alongside shareholders. Other places, well, they put shareholders first, just to different degrees. But the trend here is just impossible to ignore. Almost every major market in Asia has now made sustainability reporting mandatory. This isn't a nice-to-have anymore, it's a legal requirement, and that puts the responsibility squarely on the board of directors. Okay, so if it's mandatory, what happens when a board drops the ball on these duties? Well, two key legal ideas are starting to take shape to hold them accountable. First, you've got what's known as the Caremark claim, which actually comes from the US. This one targets a complete, total failure of oversight. A famous example is the Boeing board's alleged failure to properly monitor airplane safety before those tragic 737 MAX crashes. That's the level of mission-critical failure we're talking about here. The second approach is stepping stone liability, which comes out of Australia. Here, the logic is a bit more direct. If the company itself breaks the law, that becomes the first stepping stone to argue that the directors breached their duties because they failed to stop it from happening. So the key difference is what they focus on. A Caremark claim goes after the failure of the entire oversight system, which, as you can imagine, is really hard to prove. Stepping Stone, however, focuses on a single, specific breach by the company, which can make it a much more straightforward path to holding directors accountable. But look, bringing these cases is way easier said than done. Take the huge Client Earth versus Shell case. The court threw it out, partly because they decided the activist shareholder wasn't acting in good faith. They said they had an ulterior motive. It just goes to show you how high the hurdles can be for these private lawsuits. And because of those challenges, it's probably no surprise that public regulators are stepping up to become the main enforcers of these sustainability rules all across Asia. And they aren't trying to reinvent the wheel here. For the most part, regulators are using what's called an adaptive strategy. All that means is they're taking the same enforcement tools that have worked for financial disclosures for years and applying them to this new world of sustainability reporting. Basically, they're treating false green claims just like false financial claims. Their first move is usually what you might call the nudge. They'll engage with companies, they'll review the reports, maybe issue a warning letter here and there, and provide guidance. The idea is to guide companies toward getting it right before bringing down the hammer. But, and this is a big but, for really serious violations or for companies that just don't listen, the regulators absolutely have the hammer. We're talking major fines, suspending a company's stock from trading, and even getting directors disqualified. These actions have very, very real teeth. And this isn't just a hypothetical threat. Globally, this kind of enforcement is ramping up. Roughly 120 climate washing lawsuits were identified in just a 7-year span. That's a clear signal that regulators and courts are taking this more seriously than ever. So, to tackle this whole challenge in a really systematic way, the OECD has laid out a super clear 5-part roadmap to strengthen corporate governance across Asia. This plan is all about building a solid ecosystem. It's about creating clear rules so everyone knows what's expected, encouraging companies to comply through dialogue, and making sure there's accountability with a strong set of enforcement tools. Plus, using technology to get better data. And, this is crucial, building up the skills and expertise for everyone involved, from the directors to the regulators themselves. So, why should you care about all this? It's actually pretty simple. When boards are held more accountable, we get more reliable information from companies. That leads to more resilient businesses, and frankly, a much, much better chance that all those sustainability goals we hear about actually turn into real-world action. So you can see the foundation for accountability is being built piece by piece. But the ultimate question is still out there. Will this new framework be strong enough to finally close that gap between what companies say they're going to do and what they actually do?